Mute. Okay, so I just switched mute off, so hopefully you guys can hear me better. Okay, all right guys. So give me a second here. I'm gonna slap this onto the back of my pants and we're gonna take a look at this sheet, directional prepositions. Okay, so guys, let's take a look here. We've got a humongous list of directional prepositions. We're gonna go over them. This is a good list too because it has the use and also some example sentences, right? So I don't think I'm gonna be writing down a lot of my own example sentences here. Anyhow, let's start with our first one. This is going in alphabetical order. Of course, our first one is above. Now, I'm sure you guys all know what above means, but it means it's higher than something. So our example here is the picture hangs above my bed, right? Or my left hand is above my head. Or the plane is above me, right? So when it comes to using above, it just means that something is, higher than you, right? Or higher than the other thing that you are referring to, right? Now, another way you could use this is maybe in a workplace situation, you could say, my boss is above me, right? Now, that doesn't mean that physically your boss is above you, but that means in regards to the amount of power in your workplace or the amount of responsibility, your boss has more power, so he is above me. Or if I'm thinking about my country, Canada, of course, our Prime Minister is Justin Trudeau. I don't have any political power, unfortunately, so I could say Justin Trudeau is above me. Yes. Oh, too bad, right? Okay, so that is above and some different ways you can use it, but remember, as a directional preposition, it just means that something is higher than you or higher than the thing you are talking about. Okay, let's take a look at across. Across, very simple. I think you guys already know that. The desk is across from me, from one side to the other side, of course. You mustn't go across the road here is one example sentence. Or there isn't a bridge across the river. Okay, so it's not across there. I'm going to go across the street. Whoa. So, or maybe think about what is across the street from your apartment, right? So across the street from my apartment, there is a hotel, right? Or maybe for your place, there's a convenience store. There is a convenience store across from my apartment. Okay, but across is very simple. The camera is across from me. You guys know how to use it. Let's move on to after. Now, after as a directional preposition means that one thing follows the other thing, right? The cat ran after the dog. So that means the dog went first and then the cat followed after the dog. Or we have, a very useful phrase here, after you, right? Now, after you, this is actually incredibly useful because this is a polite expression that you can use if you're living in an English-speaking country. For example, in Canada, people really like it if you open the door for them and hold the door for them, right? So let's say, let's say you're a guy, you're a nice young guy, right? And behind you, there's a nice young woman. And you're approaching a building and you open the door. Now, what are you gonna do? You're not just gonna open the door and go right through, right? You don't wanna be rude, right? So of course you open the door and you hold it open for this young woman behind you, right? And you say, after you. It's kind of similar to saying ladies first, right? It just means you go ahead, you go first, right? So open the door, after you, oh thank you very much, you're welcome, everybody's happy, right? Okay, so yeah, after you, kind of a useful expression, but it can also just mean that one thing follows another thing, right? Just like the cat ran after the dog, or the police chased after the suspect, right? So the suspect ran away and the police are following him. Okay, let's take a look at against. You guys already know against. It says directed towards something. STH means something. The bird flew against the window. Bang. Oh no. Against can be used in a couple of different ways. We often use this when we're talking about sports, one team against another team, right? Who will Vancouver play tomorrow? They will play against Boston, right? They will play against Los Angeles or something like that. But if I am against the window, or in this case, the whiteboard, I'm just kind of like right here. I am standing against the whiteboard. I'm directed towards it, right? Or I'm standing against, well, there's not a lot in this room. Sorry, guys. I'm standing against the desk. I don't think you guys can see the desk, but I'm standing against it, right? So against, pretty simple. Let's move on to along. Along is kind of useful. It just means somebody's maybe walking in a line from one point to another, and we're just walking along the beach, right? And that's the example here. Or I'm walking along the path. I'm just going in a straight line on the path. I'm walking along the road, right? And that's what I'm doing. So yeah, it's like going in a line from one place to another, right? And that's all it means. Along is pretty simple. Okay, so after that we have among. Among. And among means you're in a group. Like, I like being among people. I like being among Brian, right? Me and Brian like to spend time together, and I like being among him, right? I like working among my coworkers, right? We work together as a group or in a group, right? That bird is flying among those other birds. That cat is playing among those other cats. Pretty simple stuff. Okay, all right, so we'll move on, guys, to around. Around means in a circular pattern, like a circle, right? So we're sitting around the campfire. So this example is kind of describing, you know, in Canada, we have a lot of wilderness, right? A lot of wild areas, lots of forests, mountains, rivers, etc., etc. So one of the most popular pastimes or hobbies in Canada is camping. And maybe while you're camping, you go fishing or hunting or something like that. And usually when you start a campfire, you know, you start a fire kind of in the forest. That sounds really dangerous, but it's not that dangerous. You set up a fire outside. Of course, you will sit around the campfire, right? Everybody's sitting around the campfire. Or everybody was standing around the building after the fire alarm went off, right? Okay, so around, pretty simple. We'll move on to at. Now, next to at here, there is an asterisk. And you're thinking, ooh, what is an asterisk? Well, asterisk is this symbol. And usually when you're reading something in a text or something online, if you see an asterisk, the meaning of this is that there's some more information or there's something else about this term that they will tell you usually at the end of the text or the end of the article, right? So whenever you see an asterisk, just think, oh, okay, this is not the only thing they want to say about this. There's more information at the end about this. But the reason why they're putting an asterisk here is because at can be used in so many different ways, right? What we have listed here is position at a point. Okay, yeah, pretty simple, right? And we've got the example, I arrived at the meeting. Okay, great. But we know at can be used as a directional preposition in many different ways, right? Yeah, I like working at Global College, right? Or she likes studying at the library. It's just describing where they are, right? Now, of course, you could also say in the library. I'm at the library, I'm in the library. In this case, it basically has the same meaning. We generally use at more often than in, though. What could I say? I'm at the convenience store, or I'm at Safeway, the grocery store, right? But anyhow, you guys are probably quite familiar with at, so we'll move on to behind, right? Now, behind has, you know, two basic meanings. One meaning, of course, is something is located at the back of something else, right? So, of course, I am not behind something. The board is behind me, right? Or the marker is behind me. Or I am behind the marker, right? in the back of, right? Now, behind also has a second meaning as a noun. Behind can also mean something else. It actually can stand for a body part. Behind, my behind, your behind. Behind can also mean B-U-M, bum. And you might be thinking, well, what is bum? Okay, well, you don't know bum, that's fine. Bum and behind, the proper term is buttocks, right? Or B-U-T-T, butt. Now, if you don't know what that means, oh, yikes, we're in a lot of trouble here. Well, the more commonly used term that is not really very proper but pretty commonly used is ASS, and I don't mean a donkey, right? So behind has the same meaning as bum, buttocks, butt, or ass. Of course, we're talking about this body part here. Whoops, I slapped the microphone. I hope it's okay. Anyhow, so yeah, behind also has that kind of meaning. It's a lot nicer to use the term behind than it is to use this one. This one here, I'm actually gonna put an asterisk here because it's a little bit rude or a little bit crude. It's a little bit too much. You don't want to use that too much, right? So if you don't want to use that and you can't remember bum or buttocks, bum is kind of the childish word for it, you can just use behind. Okay, but let's take a look at the next term here, guys. We've got below. Below. So below is kind of the opposite of above. Something is above you and something is below you, right? It's located lower than something else. So of course, the ground is below me. The floor is below me. Now, just like you can use above to describe a certain amount of power or the relationship or the power within a relationship, right? Like, of course, if you're a married man like me, we all know that our wives are above us, right? They have more power. And we know that we are below them, right? We have, you know, not enough power, right? It's so sad. Anyhow, I'm trying to think of another kind of abstract example here, below. Who is below? Well, if you think of the animal kingdom, right? Let's think of one of the lowest ranking animals. Ooh, I don't know. I like cats. Are cats above dogs or below dogs? That's a tough one. I guess it depends on whether you're a dog lover or a cat lover. For me, they're equal. So, but who? I don't want to say somebody is below me. Okay. Maybe some people think that homeless people are below them, right? They think like, oh, homeless people don't have a job and they're so annoying. So yeah, they're definitely below me. My social status or the amount of power I have is higher than them. So I am above homeless people and they are below me. It's not a nice thing to say, but anyhow, it can be a useful term though. Okay, let's take a look at the next one, guys. We've got beside, right? Which just basically means next to. I am beside the whiteboard. Or if there was a person here named John, I am beside John. Or our house is beside the supermarket. My apartment is beside a convenience store. So think about your house or your apartment. What do you live beside, right? Do you live beside a supermarket? Do you live beside a stadium? Do you live beside a hardware store? Do you live beside a military barracks? Wow, that's weird. I highly doubt any of you do. But anyhow, so yeah, beside, very, very simple. Okay. So everybody, please take a look at the next page because we still got a huge list. And we're moving on here and we've got between. And of course, between means something or somebody is on each side, right? So I am between the marker and my left hand. Oh my God, that's so boring. Let's take a look at the example here. Our house is between the supermarket and the school. So of course, we've got the supermarket. And then we also have the school. And of course they said our house is between the supermarket and the school. So that means they are located here, right? Okay, so between is very, very simple. You know, two things are surrounding the other thing, you are between them, right? Now, another way you could use between is in a more abstract way. Let's say, for example, right now, let's say you don't have a job, right? You had a job, you quit that job, maybe you were going to look for another one. Or unfortunately, maybe because of, I don't know, COVID-19 or something, you lost your job. In this case, you can say something like, and this is pretty commonly used, I am between jobs. Now basically the meaning of this is kind of sad. It means I am unemployed. But I am looking for work. So yeah, it just means like you had your previous job, you don't have it anymore, and you're looking for another job. So you are between jobs. But the sad reality of it is that it does mean that you are unemployed, but you are looking and hopefully you will find a job soon. Anyhow, guys, that's between. Let's take a look at by. By can also be used in a similar way to near. He lives in the house by the river. I live in an apartment by a hotel. She lives in an apartment by a supermarket, right? So yeah, you could use by like that. Very simple. We'll move on to close to, which also has a similar meaning to near, right? I live close to, but I would say the difference here, if you're wondering, because it just says near for both of them, right? If you are by something, I think it means they're very, very close or next to something. But if you say close to, it doesn't have to be really, really, really close to your building. It doesn't have to be right next to, right? So my apartment basically is right next to a supermarket. So I would say my apartment is next to a supermarket. I could also say my apartment is close to a supermarket, but in my opinion, it'd be better just to say next to, because they're right next to each other. Now, about one block, well, a block and a half away from my apartment, there is a BC liquor store, you know, a store that sells alcohol. Now, this is a block and a half away. So I wouldn't say my apartment is next to a liquor store, because this is not true. They're not right next to each other, right? So I could say though, my apartment is close to a liquor store. In my opinion, if you can get to a place in about 5 to 10 minutes from your apartment or from your house, in this case you can use close to. So it means it's close, but it doesn't mean that it's right next to you, right? Now, of course, we also know close to can be used in a more abstract way as well, right? It's not just about your physical location. It could also be used to describe how close you are in a relationship, right? So I could say, for example, my family and I are close. So that means we stay in good contact, we have a good relationship with each other, right? Now, what would be the opposite of that in regards to a relationship, right? So my family and I are close. You could also say, let's say you have a brother, and recently, let's say the past 2 years, you haven't talked very much with your brother. For whatever reason, you guys are not close, right? You could say, for example, my brother and I have a distant relationship. So basically this means that your brother and yourself are not close. You're not in good contact. This does not mean that you hate each other. This just means that you don't often contact each other. You don't have like a close, warm relationship. But yeah, don't think that it means you hate each other. But if you have a distant relationship with someone, it means, yeah, you're just not in good contact with them. Anyhow, guys, let's continue onwards down the list, and our next term is down. Ooh, clever, right? Anyhow, down means from high to low, and our example sentence here is, he came down the hill. All right, so he came down the hill. I walked down the stairs, right? And that's all it is. So down, pretty simple. I think you guys are okay with that. Let's take a look at from. From is a very commonly used directional preposition. We have the place where it starts. Okay, great. So our example question here is, do you come from Tokyo, right? Where, or like, of course, when you meet somebody for the first time, a lot of people, after they ask you for your name and maybe your job, they might ask you, where are you from, right? And that could mean like, what city are you from, or what country are you from, right? These days in Canada, we don't like to ask people so directly where they're from, because some people think that's kind of rude. But anyhow, if somebody asks me, Alan, where are you from? Of course, I could just respond by saying, oh, I am from Canada, right? But maybe I want to be more specific, so I want to think of, I don't know, the name of my hometown, the province, and the country, right? So I could say, I am from Terrace, British Columbia, Canada, bleh, right? Now, maybe you are from, let's say, somewhere in Brazil, right? You're from Sao Paulo. Now, actually, I'm sorry, I don't know if Sao Paulo is in a certain province in Brazil. Actually, I think Sao Paulo is its own province. But, of course, you would just say, I'm from Sao Paulo, Brazil. Or I think it's Sao Paulo, Brazil. The city, the name of the province, and the country, yeah. Or let's say you are from Chile, right? And you're from Santiago. I'm from Santiago, Chile. Santiago is the capital city of Chile. And in Chile is quite chilly, and we like to eat chili. Oh, so bad, right? But anyhow, let's say I'm more familiar with maybe Korean geography a little bit. So if you're from, let's say, Busan in Korea, and somebody asks you, where are you from? You could say, I'm from Busan, Gyeongsang Province, Korea. Or I'm from Busan, Gyeongsang Province, South Korea, or Republic of Korea, right? Anyhow, I'm going on for too long about this. So you guys are okay with from. Let's take a look at in front of. We all know in front of, right? It's kind of the opposite of behind. The marker is in front of me. It says the place that is in the direction it faces. Our house is in front of the supermarket, right? Let's say in front of the house there is a, ooh, I'm so bad at drawing, and let's say this is the house, and this is a, what is this? This is a food stand. In front of my house there is a food stand, right? And behind this food stand there is my house. Wow, all right, awesome. Okay, so in front of, I think you guys are too familiar with this, too simple. Let's move on. We've got inside, opposite of outside. I am inside. I think you guys are probably inside. Well, maybe you're outside. Maybe you're in the library, or you're, I don't know, you're outside on the streets watching this YouTube video, hopefully learning something. Anyhow, inside is too easy. My organs are inside my body. The coffee is inside the cup, etc., etc. Okay, so we have also got in, and in also has an asterisk here, because in can be used in so many different ways. Place seen in 3 dimensions. Yikes, that's kind of a hard explanation though. Larger areas. Okay, we slept in the car. Wow, that sounds bad. Maybe they lost their jobs and lost their apartment. Or I was born in England, right? I was born in Canada. I was born in, you know, could be again city, province, country, right? I was born in Terrace, British Columbia, Canada. Were you born in Sao Paulo, Brazil? Yes, I was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil. All right, so inside and in, that's too simple. Let's take a look at into. We use into when we're talking about entering something or entering some place, right? You shouldn't go into the castle, right? Because if you go into the castle, there might be a dragon called Bowser, and if you're not Mario, you're gonna die. Ooh, bad joke, right? Okay, but into. I walked into the building. I went into the store. I went into the supermarket, right? Simple stuff. So let's take a look at near. Now we have near, which just means close to. Remember, near, in my opinion, okay, let me erase this just a little bit, because I know a lot of people can get kind of a little bit confused between like next to, near, close to, etc., etc. And I've been using this for too long, so let me erase this here. So let's say there is your house, and then there is a store, and then over here there is a liquor store, and here there is a park. Now, when I write down park here, I don't mean my good Korean friend, Mr. Park. I mean an actual park. Ooh, bad joke, right? So anyhow, this is your house. Now, the store, we could say, the store is next to my house, right? It's right next to the place, right? Now, for here, I would say near. The park is near my house. And for the liquor store, I can say close to. Now remember, a lot of, whoa, that close to looks weird, right? A lot of these terms can kind of be used interchangeably and nobody's really gonna care. But in my opinion, something that's close to your place can be a little further out. Remember what I said before, like a 5-10 minute walk. Something that is near your place, I think, should be a little bit closer, but not right next to it. And something that's right next to your place has to be located, you know, right next to it. I couldn't think of another term besides next to. Okay, but anyhow, so we got near, we got next to, which has the same meaning as beside, which we already looked at before. So let's take a look at off. And off means away from something. The cat jumped off the roof. The marker fell off the table. I am, now you can use off in a different way as well. You can say, I'm off my medication. That means I'm no longer taking medication, right? She is off work. That means she's not working today, right? Maybe because she has a holiday or because she's on vacation, right? Anyhow, but usually when we use off, it means something comes off. It fell off of something, right? So anyhow, let's take a look at on. On can obviously be used in a lot of different ways, kind of the opposite of off. You know, something is on the table. I am on the street. And it says, yeah, touches the surface, so there's a fly on the table. Or is seen as a point on a line. We were on the way from Paris to Rome. Now actually, that's a better example here, right? A lot of times when somebody asks you, you know, where are you? Let's say you receive a text, right? Somebody says, where are you? And let's say you're going from your house to work, right? You're not at work yet, but you're not at home. In this case, you can say, I am on my way to work, right? Or, I don't know, let's say you're going to the grocery store. I'm on my way to the grocery store. So on my way is kind of a useful expression. On my way or on the way, right? And that just means you're in transition from one point to another point, right? You're going to that place. You're not there yet, right? But you're on the path. Anyhow, so guys, let's flip over to the other sheet here. Oh my God, this is a lot of stuff. We've got onto, moving to a place. The cat jumped onto the roof, right? So the cat went from somewhere to the roof of the house. It jumped onto it, right? I went onto the bus, right? So I got onto the bus. I'm going to go onto a helicopter ride today, right? I'm going to get on a helicopter and take a ride. So onto means you're going from one place and entering another place that is usually higher. It kind of involves this movement, maybe a large step or hopping onto it or jumping onto something. Okay, now we've got opposite. And opposite can be used in a similar way as across from, right? Because opposite means on the other side, right? Our house is opposite the supermarket, right? The store is opposite, the store is opposite the cat park. No, cat cafe. Actually, I don't think we have a cat cafe in Vancouver. I could be wrong, but the cat cafe is opposite the store. Let's say there's a road here, right? Or the store is opposite the cat cafe. So it can be used in a similar way as across from, but not as commonly used when we're talking about directions and where things are located. Anyhow, besides that, guys, the next term we got out is, the next one we got here is out of. And that just means you're leaving something. The cat jumped out of the window. So there's a window, the cat jumps out of it. I got out of the store, right? I left the store because I didn't want to be there anymore. John got out of his relationship with Sarah, right? So they kind of broke up because maybe John felt like Sarah was too demanding, right? Anyhow, so that's out of. Let's take a look at outside, opposite of inside. So the question here, the example is, can you wait outside? No, I can't. I'd rather wait inside, right? But of course, everybody knows inside and outside. Too simple, so let's move on to over. And that means above something or somebody. The cat jumped over the wall, right? I got over the chair, right? Now we also know over can be used in kind of a more useful way to describe overcoming a problem. Like if we think of a problem like a hill, right? And you start at the problem and you know it's not fun and it's getting worse. But if you get over it, that means the problem is no longer there, right? So let's say your good friend John, you know, he was in a relationship with, did I say Sarah? Maybe Sarah. Anyhow, he was in a relationship with Sarah and things were not going well, right? So they broke up, but after breaking up, you know, John was so sad, right? For maybe 2 or 3 days. But after 2 or 3 days, you went out with him, you had a good time, and John got over Sarah, right? So he kind of got over that breakup, that bad feeling, right? Or we use this a lot when we talk about illness, especially like things like common colds or flus or fevers, right? Let's say your friend Sally had a flu, right? And you met her and she's coughing, she feels really sick, and you're like, oh my God, stay away from me. But you call her a week later and you ask Sally, did you get over the flu? And Sally says, yes, I got over the flu. So that means Sally is all better now. So over can also be used in that way, and that's kind of useful. Okay, guys, but let's take a look at our next term here. We've got pass, going near something or somebody. Go past the post office. Or I walked past something. So if you walked past something, like, and you use it in the past tense, I walked by, or I went by. I got past this place. It means you already went near that place and you're past it. Oh, that doesn't make sense because I'm using past as the example. So yeah, you already went by and now you can no longer see it, or it's no longer next to you, right? So if the desk is here, I walked past the desk. The desk is kind of in the past, right? And that's how we could use it there. Now, this example sentence says, go past the post office. So they're saying, you know, there's a post office there. You need to go past it, beyond the post office. Okay, let's take a look at round. Round just means in a circle. This is the same kind of example for around. So round and around can be used interchangeably. No point in looking at this, so we'll move on to through. And you know, going through means going from one point to the other, kind of through something, right? We went through the tunnel. Maybe you're driving a car and there's a tunnel and you have to go through it, right? Or maybe you really enjoy hiking around, I don't know, mountains or forests, and you think, okay, I've got to go through this forest, right? So through can just mean you're going from one place to another, but it kind of has the idea that you're going through an area like some kind of opening, or there's some kind of obstacle, but you're going to go through it. Okay, and then we have to. I like going to Australia. Can you come to me? I've never been to Africa. To is too simple. We'll move on because the next term we have here is towards. And when we use towards, it means in the direction of something. We ran towards the castle. Oh, cool. I would like to go to a castle too. He came towards me. So he was coming up very close to me. Please don't come towards me, right? And actually, you can say that. Let's say you're living in Canada or America, and somebody's getting too close to you, and you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Please stop walking towards me, right? So yeah, towards, pretty useful. Next term we got here is under. We know that under means that something is below another thing, right? So, I don't know, of course you guys can't see, but there are some wires under the desk. The marker is under me, right? I am under my dad, right? No, that's in a more abstract way, right? That means my dad would have more power or something. Anyhow, but that is under, and you guys are okay with that. So let's take a look at up. And up just means from low to high. We went up the hill. I went up the stairs. I went down the stairs, right? So up is pretty simple. Okay guys, now I know that was kind of a humongous list of directional prepositions here, but I also know that you guys are familiar with most of these directional prepositions. So I think what you guys should do is make sure, like later when you have time, make sure that you are comfortable with all of these directional prepositions here, because all of them are quite useful. However, keep in mind that a lot of these terms are kind of interchangeable with each other, especially the ones that we looked at earlier, like by, next to, near, and close to, right? A lot of those terms are pretty... Not heard, I can't listening, I can't hear. Okay, yeah, I know you guys had trouble listening to me earlier, but don't worry, I think we got it solved. But anyhow, all right guys, so yeah, a lot of these terms can kind of be used interchangeably like the ones I talked about here, but make sure you guys are comfortable with these ones. And anyhow, what we're gonna do next is move on to, and hopefully this is kind of fun. At the top of the sheet, it should say teach this, but we're not really gonna look at the first sheet here. I want you guys to turn to the back side. Now actually, this is a really, really fun activity, but can't really do this activity without a partner. So it would be good later if you have time to do this with a partner at home. But I think what we should do here is just take a look and try to understand these terms in the sentences. So these questions here, not questions, these statements are kind of interesting. In A here, so everybody take a look at this one. It says, name 3 things you would never run towards. So run towards. What are 3 things you would never run towards? Now, I just want to erase the board here, guys, so because maybe I want to write down some examples. So think about it, guys. What are 3 things you would not run towards, right? Now, that could be anything, right? What would you not run towards? Because maybe it's scary, or it's dangerous, or something like that. Okay, well, imagine that you're hiking in the forest around Canada, right? Let's say around my hometown, up north in northern British Columbia. Now, if I was hiking in northern British Columbia in the forest, it's possible that I could run into a bear, right? Yikes. And for sure, I would not run towards a bear, right? Because that would be scary. So actually, that would be one of my answers, would be I would not run towards a bear because I don't have a death wish. I don't want to die, right? Okay, so there's one answer. What else would you not run towards? Let's say there's a fire, right? Would you run towards a fire? Now, if you're a firefighter, you probably would, right? Because you want to help people. But if you're a regular person, you would not run towards a fire because you don't want to get burnt. So I'm going to write down a fire. Okay, and let's think of something else. What else is dangerous? What else is something you would not run towards? Well, I would not run towards, what would I not? I'm going to write down here, incoming traffic. Incoming traffic just means traffic that is moving in your direction. Of course, you don't want to run towards incoming traffic. So in each one of these cases here, you would not run towards it, right? Because if you run towards it, you're gonna be in big trouble, right? You're maybe gonna die, unfortunately, right? So I would not run towards a bear, a fire, or incoming traffic. That's just really dangerous. Okay, so let's take a look at B, guys. Think about B. Name 3 things you would go through on a train journey. Whoa, that's a lot harder, actually. Now, when we were talking about through earlier, I mentioned that you could go through a tunnel, right? So actually that's going to be one of my answers here, a tunnel. You know, when you're taking a train, sometimes you go through a tunnel. Now, what else might you go through while you're taking a train? Okay, now, I know all my examples are very Canadian, but well, that's because I'm from Canada. You guys know there's a very large mountain range in Canada that separates 2 provinces from each other, and those provinces are BC and Alberta. Between these 2 provinces, there's a large mountain range called the Rocky Mountains, right? So if you want to go from, I don't know, Vancouver to Calgary, from British Columbia to Alberta, you have to go through the Rocky Mountains, right? So if you're driving, actually it's a really nice drive and I highly, highly recommend it. Or I do recommend kind of going on, a sightseeing tour to the Rocky Mountains. You have to drive through this mountain path to get to Alberta. So I'm going to say you're taking a train. Of course, you could take a train from Vancouver to Calgary, and that would go through the Rocky Mountains. So I could say the Rocky Mountains, but I'll give you guys something more general. Go through a mountain path. So if your train goes through a mountainous area, you can call it a mountain path. And if you're taking a train, what else might you go through? Trying to think what else. Okay, well the train might go through a forest, right? You might have to enter and go through a forest, so I'm gonna say a forest. Okay guys, so let's take a look at C here. In C it says, name 3 things you can walk across. Okay, what are 3 things you can walk across? Now, usually we use walk across when we talk about going from one point to another, especially when you're going over a bridge. So that's going to be my first answer. Walk across a bridge. What else can I walk across? I can walk across a... Now actually I do need to think about this for a second. And my mind is kind of stuck on something else. Actually I'm thinking about something kind of religious, because usually when we talk about, when I was a kid, when I had to go to religious school, we talked about Jesus walking across the water, right? Of course, he walked on the water. Anyhow, I'm kind of stuck on that right now. But yeah, you can walk across a bridge, you can walk across a, well, we could also just say a path, and walk across a field. Maybe a soccer field or a football field, depending on which term you guys use. Anyhow, so that one, not so interesting. Let's take a look at D. And maybe I'm going to get a different marker here. Name 3 sports where you jump over things. Okay, now, the obvious one I can think of right now is the Olympic sport, high jump, right? So I'm going to write down high jump. And of course, that's a one, I think, where you have to use the pole and you kind of jump and you go over it, and that's high jump. What are some other sports where you have to jump over things, right? Now, I'm also thinking basketball. Now, that's not the main thing you're trying to do, but sometimes you have to jump over other people to try to, I don't know, slam dunk the ball, right? And what is another sport where you have to jump over something or jump over maybe somebody? Definitely not golf. Yeah, you're not really that active when you're golfing, right? What else? What else do you have to jump over when you're doing a sport? Now, of course, in soccer, we could use this for, yeah, I know it's kind of boring, but I'm going to write down soccer. Of course, sometimes when you're playing soccer, again, you're jumping over other players or you're jumping over the ball. So yeah, maybe that one. But let's take a look at one more, guys, and then we're going to take a short 10-minute break. It says, name 3 places you can walk through. Oh, okay. That's pretty easy. A lot of people walk through a mall. Now, of course, I mean a mall, a place with a lot of shops, right? Or, like I said before, a lot of people could walk through a forest. Or you could walk through an office. Okay, all right, so that one was too easy. Let's just take a look at F, and then I think we're going to take a break. And maybe you can think about F. It says, name 3 things in nature that go up and down. Okay, that's kind of hard. So you need to think about 3 things in nature, in the wild, that go up and go down. What are 3 things that go up and go down? So maybe you guys think about that. We got a long, well, not a long break. We got a 10-minute break. So why don't we take a break, you guys think about it, and when we come back, hopefully you guys can give me some answers. Please give me some answers. Okay guys, but yeah, I'll take a 10-minute break. I will see you again in 10 minutes. Okay, welcome back, guys. So, like we were taking a look at right before this video, we were taking a look at name 3 things, right? And we're on F now. Now, F, right before the break, it said, name 3 things in nature that go up and go down, right? Now, 3 things in nature, you know, nature, forests, mountains, rivers, whatever, the natural world. Lots of things go up and go down. Now, the first one I can think about here is the sun, right? And I'm not talking about my good Korean friend, Mr. Sun. Oh, bad joke, right? So the sun goes up and it goes down, right? But we gotta also think about what's kind of the opposite of the sun, the moon, right? The moon goes up and down. What else in nature goes up and goes down? Can you guys think of an answer? I can't. Well, I need a second actually. What goes up and down in nature besides the sun and the moon? What else goes up and down? Man, I'm having a hard time thinking of something here. What else goes up and down? For some reason I'm thinking about water. That doesn't really help though. In nature, well, we can include animals in nature. So I'm just gonna say birds, because sometimes they fly up and sometimes they fly down. Okay, now this list is looking pretty messy. I know I'm not writing very straight on the board here. I'm not following my own rules, but move on here to G. So G, maybe this is more interesting. It says, name 3 things that are difficult to walk along. Now, when you're walking along something, yes, good, yes, birds, awesome, okay, great. Anyhow, when you're walking along something, you're kind of right next to it, right? What are 3 things that are difficult to walk along? Well, sometimes I think it's difficult to walk along a river, because maybe there's lots of rocks next to it, and if you, I don't know, misstep, you might fall into the river and get injured, right? So it can be a little bit difficult to walk along a river. What else might it be difficult to walk along? Anybody got an answer? I gotta think of something too. What is it difficult to walk along? Well, maybe in most cities there is an area that's usually kind of well known for being a little bit dangerous or being kind of a bad area. If I'm thinking about Vancouver, I don't know, maybe you guys are in Vancouver. You guys probably all know about East Hastings. It's kind of Canada's worst neighborhood. There's lots of homelessness there. There is a lot of drug abuse, sometimes violence. So it's kind of difficult walking along East Hastings Street. But maybe in your hometown, there's also an area that's well known for being kind of dangerous. Maybe you could think of that one too. I don't know what that would be, but anyhow. All right, so let's think of another place. What else is it difficult to walk along? Oh, okay, this is kind of a boring answer, but it's also difficult to walk along a tight rope. Now, tight rope, Justin Trudeau lives there. Joke. All right, yeah. Okay, number 3, I wrote down tightrope. Tightrope, you know, some people, I don't know if that's really a sport, but that's when you set up a rope and then people walk along it, right? It's very difficult to walk on the tightrope because maybe you'll fall down, right? Okay, so that's my answer for number 3. Anyhow, all right, guys, so let's take a look at the next one. We'll move on to H. Name 3 places you go past on your way to class. Okay, that's not too bad. Actually, I want to kind of change this one though. Let's change this to name 3 places you go past on your way to school, right? So maybe when you walk to school, I don't know how long it takes you, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, etc. What are 3 places you go past? Now for me, that's very simple. Now, oh, I don't have my coffee cup anymore, but every morning when I walk to work, I always go past Canada's most famous, most popular coffee shop. So, do you guys have an idea? What is Canada's most famous and most popular coffee shop? Starts with a T. Anybody? Most famous, popular coffee shop? Starts with a T. And then an H. Okay, doesn't look like anybody's got it right now, but I'm talking about Tim Hortons. So Tim Hortons is Canada's most popular coffee shop. I go past Tim Hortons every morning on my way to work. But of course, I also go past many other things, right? What else do I go past? There's a very popular convenience store that I go past every morning on my way to work. And of course, that popular convenience store, which is also very popular, I believe, in Japan, and I think it's in Korea. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's in Korea. But anyhow, 7-Eleven, right? I always go past 7-Eleven on my way to work. But on my way to work, I also go past, oh, so many stores. Which one? Is there any one I really like? Not really. Yeah, but I'm just gonna write down, I go past some stores. But how about you guys? Think about 3 things at least that you go past on your way to work or on your way to school, right? Okay, now we got just 2 more here. So I'm just gonna erase A and B, and we'll take a look at the next 2 ones here. And we've got I and J, of course. So let's take a look at I. So for I here, it says name 3 places you can't go into without buying a ticket. So you need to think of 3 places that you can't go into unless you get some kind of ticket. Now, the first one that pops into my mind is a concert. Probably a music concert, right? But I'm just gonna write down a concert. Of course, you can't go into a concert unless you have a ticket. Now also, if you're in your 20s or maybe your 30s, maybe you're the kind of person who on the weekend likes to go out, go to bars, meet their friends and stuff like that. Okay, good. Actually, somebody gave us an answer. Movie theater is correct. A movie theater. Yeah, you cannot enter a movie theater unless you have a ticket, right? Well, actually, you can go inside, but you might get caught and then they'll kick you out, right? But you should get a ticket, right? But going back to what I was saying before, you might be the kind of person that likes to go out, meet your friends, and drink a little bit on the weekend, and maybe you also like dancing. So where can you drink and dance at the same time? And I'm not talking about your local park. Oh, that's a bad joke, right? But anyhow, number 3, it could be something with a C. Someplace where you can dance and drink and meet lots of people. Talking about a club, right? You cannot enter a club unless you have a ticket, usually, right? I guess it depends on the club and how busy they are. But yes, you cannot enter a concert, a movie theater, or a club without a ticket. You need to pay to play. Okay, but let's take a look at J, guys. Name 3 things you go out of every day. Name 3 things you go out of. Well, that's kind of, oh, good. Yeah, you got it. Name 3 things you go out of every day. So on a daily basis, what are 3 things you go out of? I went out of. Well, I got out of, go out of, or got out of. Every day you get out of this thing when you wake up, right? I got out of my bed, right? So we could write down bed. I know that's kind of a boring answer. Or I got out of my, Yeah, awesome, awesome. Somebody said, I got out of the shower. Good, 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 good. And what else do we get out of? Get out of bed, get out of the shower, and you know, maybe your roommate or your loved one, your wife, your boyfriend, you know, whatever it is, maybe they're like, hey, get out of the shower. I need to use the washroom. Okay, somebody just said jail, and they said just kidding. But no, that's true. Get out. Oh yeah, no, it's supposed to be every day. So yeah, we can't put that one down. But it's true. Get out of jail, right? That kind of works, but we don't get out of jail every day. If we do, we're living some kind of rough lifestyle. Get out of bed. Get out of the shower. Get out of. You could say, maybe you're at work. Right? It's near the end of your workday, and your friend texts you and they say, hey, where are you? And you write back, you text them back, you say, hey, I'm still at work. And then your friend says, hey, when do you get out of work? Right? So you could also say, I get out of work at 7, right? I'm gonna get out of here. So you could also say work, right? But yeah, very good answers, Elias. Elias de Messias. Sorry, my pronunciation with Portuguese and Spanish terms is pretty bad. But anyhow, guys, all right, so we got this list done. All right, awesome. And a lot of these things are pretty useful. They're pretty good. And you might want to use them for this week's writing assignment. So we're going to move on. But guys, I know if you take a look at the next couple of... Oh, and that's a really good answer. Somebody gave a good answer, so I'm going to write that down. Get out of your comfort zone. So I'm going to put an asterisk here. Out of your, or out of my comfort zone. This is actually a really good expression, to get out of one's comfort zone. To get out of one's comfort zone means to not just live your regular life. You wake up in the morning, you have breakfast, you go to work, you come home, you cook dinner, you go to sleep, etc., etc. Get out of your comfort zone means to try to explore the world, right? If somebody says, hey, get out of your comfort zone, they're trying to tell you that you need to kind of change your life, right? Don't just live in your comfort zone where you do the same thing every day. You got to try to be more adventurous. You have to try to explore the world, right? And a lot of famous entrepreneurs, CEOs, they often advise people to get out of their comfort zone, like Steve Jobs, right? He didn't lead a kind of conventional, normal lifestyle. He would often get out of his comfort zone and really kind of explore the world and think of new ideas. So anyhow, that's a really good expression. But guys, we're gonna move on off of this, so I'm gonna erase this in a second, but I know if you guys take a look at the next couple of sheets here, we have this location and direction sheet, which is all about taking a look at some vocabulary. This is really, really awesome stuff. But I think if we really got into this, it would take up too much time. And so what I'm going to do is I think you guys should try to look at this for homework and try to find the answers. I believe there is an answer key at the end that you could refer to. So I kind of want to skip this and maybe come back to this if we have time later in the third class. But I'm worried about time, so I think we're gonna kind of skip this one, and instead I would like to look at some more difficult vocabulary terms that might be more useful for you guys, especially if you're looking for higher level vocab. So I'd like you guys instead to take a look at this sheet here called Town and Country. And it says topic specific vocabulary. The reason why I want to look at this one here is because there's a lot of terms here that are much higher level and I think more useful for you guys. So let's take a look at that one instead. I'm just going to erase this stuff on the board and then we'll take a look at that sheet. But obviously the first activity here is very simple. You need to match something. It says match the sentences in the left-hand column with the most appropriate responses or sentences in the right-hand column. And use the words and phrases in bold to help you. Okay, so this one I'm a little bit excited about because I like talking about higher level vocab because sometimes interesting things kind of pop up, right? Okay, so let's take a look at number 1. And this must be from the UK because they're referring to London pretty often here and life in the UK. Okay, so, oh, this thing is dead, eh? All right, I will move on to a different marker. Let's see. Is this one gonna work for me? Yeah, okay, it's gonna work. All right. Okay, guys, take a look at number 1. We've got London is a truly cosmopolitan city. Okay, so cosmopolitan is in bold. And you want to think, what does that mean? Cosmopolitan. All right. Now, cosmopolitan, kind of a higher level adjective, right? Maybe you live in a cosmopolitan city. Now, when I think about Vancouver, could I describe Vancouver as a cosmopolitan city? Yes, I would describe Vancouver as a cosmopolitan city, but usually when we think of the word cosmopolitan, the city that most often comes to mind is New York City, and also a city like London. Now, cosmopolitan basically means diverse, a lot of diversity, very multicultural, right? Lots of different restaurants from different countries from all over the world. If you live in a cosmopolitan city, maybe across from your apartment, there's an Ethiopian restaurant, or a restaurant from Kenya, and then a restaurant from China, and a restaurant from, I don't know, Japan, etc., etc., etc. So a cosmopolitan city will have a lot of diversity, a lot of multiculturalism, right? So what would be a good response from the right-hand column? Now, we take a look right across from 1. We have A, drug abuse is also a big problem. So is that a good response? No. That doesn't really address the idea of being cosmopolitan. So if you take a look here, what would be a good answer? A good answer, a city, the world, not from a state. Not from a state. Yes, yeah. Yes, good. A good answer here would be N. It's a melting pot for people from all parts of the world. Okay, so a good answer for number 1 is N. Now, actually, that's kind of hard to connect those two, to be honest. A melting pot describes a culture, and actually, Canada is not described as a melting pot. But these are kind of useful terms. So let's take a quick look there. Melting pot, and kind of the opposite is mosaic. When we talk about cultures or countries where there are people from many different cultures coming to that country, sometimes we describe them as either a melting pot or a mosaic. Canada is usually described more as a mosaic, whereas the United States is described more as a melting pot. And the idea here is that a mosaic is a country where people come from different cultures and they kind of keep their own culture, right? They adapt to the local culture in Canada or whatever, but they also keep their own culture. So they're Canadian and they're also Japanese, or they're Canadian and they're also Korean, or they're also Mexican, or whatever. But the United States is usually referred to as a melting pot because you can come from wherever, but the Americans kind of expect that you become American and that being American is your priority, not being Mexican or not being Nigerian or Japanese or whatever. So a melting pot describes a country where you kind of have to fit the identity of the country, and that's more important than your original identity. Whereas a mosaic kind of is more, how can I put it, easygoing. They think like, well, you can keep your own culture, but also be Canadian, whatever, right? But yeah, the United States is definitely a melting pot, whereas Canada is more of a mosaic, a mix of cultures. So anyhow, yeah, London is a truly cosmopolitan city. It is kind of a melting pot for people from all over the world. There's a lot of diversity in London, but there's also a lot of diversity in Vancouver and Toronto. Maybe less so in Montreal, but they're also kind of cosmopolitan cities. However, if you go to my hometown, my hometown is very small. It's in the countryside. It's not really a cosmopolitan city. You don't have a lot of options. But let's take a look at number 2, guys. Number 2, a modern metropolis needs a good integrated transport system. Okay, so we got the word metropolis, right? And a metropolis basically describes a very, very, very large city, right? A metropolis, I don't think I would call Vancouver a metropolis, right? Vancouver has a population of about, I think Greater Vancouver, 2.5 million people or 2.5 million people. That's big, but not too big. When we imagine metropolis, we're usually thinking like upwards of 10 million people. So this is describing very large cities. Mexico City is a metropolis. Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Tokyo, Seoul, New York, LA. These cities are, definitely Tokyo. These cities are metropolises. They are very, very large. Shanghai, Beijing, Moscow, Rome, etc. They're very big cities. Now, so let's think about this here. A modern metropolis needs a good integrated transport system. Yes, of course, it needs trains or subways, buses, etc., etc. What would be a good response to number 2? Oh, okay. The response is kind of boring, but I think M would be the best answer here. So it says, unfortunately, this is something that most large capital cities lack. They don't have a very well integrated transport system. I don't know if I agree with that, because I've traveled to quite a few metropolises, and usually they do have a well integrated transportation system. So I would actually kind of disagree with M, although I think that is the answer. That would be a response. Okay, but let's move on to number 3, guys. Number 3, we've got London suffers a lot from traffic congestion. Okay, congestion, pretty good word. What is congestion? Congestion basically has a similar meaning to like blockage, right? Or we often say congested, right? If you say, I am congested, that usually means your nose is blocked because maybe you're sick. There's too much mucus or snot in your nose. If you say, I'm so congested today, I can't breathe out of my nose. But if you say, traffic is congested, or London suffers from a lot of traffic congestion, it means there's a lot of traffic jams, right, in the city, right? And I'm not talking about strawberry or blueberry jam. It's not delicious like that. It's just a big problem. Oh, terrible joke, right? Anyhow, yes, so congestion is a problem in London. I've also heard that in the United States, LA is quite well known for having really bad traffic congestion. So what would be a good response to London suffers a lot from traffic congestion? Oh, okay. So I can spot the answer here. So remember, they're talking about congestion. They're talking about traffic, right? So a good answer would be G, right? Because G says, it is especially bad during the rush hour when thousands of commuters try to enter or leave the city. So we've got 2 more good terms here, right? Rush hour, when everybody is rushing to or from work, right? So usually rush hour is in the morning, let's say 7 to 9, but also later in the late afternoon or evening, 5 to 7, when people are leaving work, right? So that is rush hour. And we also have commuters, right? Commuters are people who are going to and from work, right? Every day you commute to work, right? You walk or you drive to work. Okay, good. Let's take a look, guys, at number 4. Poverty in the inner city areas can breed crime. Ooh, we got some really tough terms here. Okay, so we got to start, guys. What is poverty? Does anybody have an idea? What is poverty? Anybody? Poverty. Well, Poverty is, you know, a very unfortunate thing, but poverty describes the state of being poor. Elias, in our modern times with our lives feel like, oh, sorry, Elias, it sounds like a good sentence, but I can't see the whole thing. In our modern times, our lives feel like, and then I can't see the rest. All right, I'm gonna try to check that out later during the break. It looks like a good example sentence, but yeah, basically poverty means being poor, right? Usually we might say, for example, there is a lot of poverty in some kind of place, and that means there is a lot of poor people, right? So unfortunately we could say, like, you know, in many places in Africa there is a high level of poverty, right? Or maybe in many places in the Middle East there is also a high level of poverty. There are a lot of poor people. A perpetually rush hour. Oh, a perpetual rush hour would be terrible. But anyhow, so yeah, poverty in the inner city area. So inner city area just means really close to downtown, right? The inner city area. And this is usually more of a problem in the US and I think also in the UK, where like in the inner cities, there's actually a lot of poverty, but in Canada, it's not really true. If I think about Vancouver, like at least downtown Vancouver, there's not a lot of poverty besides the East Hastings area, right? Except for that, there's not a lot of poverty here. But a lot of cities in the US, a lot of the poor areas tend to be located in the downtown core, which is very, very strange. Gotta go to sleep. Thanks, Allan. Hey, yeah, Elias, yeah, hey, have a good time. Thanks for joining. See you next time. But yeah, in the UK as well, there's a lot of poverty located in the inner city areas in London, Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol, you know, whatever, right? Which is very different from Canada. Anyhow, poverty in the inner city areas can breed crime. Now, breed can be another word for create, right? So what they're saying here is poverty, a lot of poor people living in the downtown area, this can cause crime. So what would be a good response? A good response to this one would actually be A, because A says drug abuse is also a big problem. That kind of fits with the idea of crime and poverty, right? And that's kind of what we can see in Vancouver, right? We have a very high level of poverty in East Hastings, and this creates, unfortunately, a lot of drug abuse and a lot of crime. Okay, but anyhow, guys, let's move on to number 5. Cities around the world have seen a huge population explosion. Okay, now that might sound bad initially when you look at it. You're like, you know, population explosion. Oh my God, a lot of people are dying. Well, actually, no. It actually has the opposite meaning. A population explosion is when the population is increasing very, very, very quickly, right? So if my hometown experiences a population explosion, it means suddenly a lot of people are being born or a lot of people are moving to my hometown. So the population goes up. So let's try to think, guys, what would be a good response? Take a look. A good response for number 5. Okay, actually a good response would actually be I, because I says, nowadays, there are more city dwellers than ever before. Now guys, city dwellers. City, not concerned about, but dwellers. Now, dweller is not a term that we often use, but dweller describes someone who lives somewhere, right? He's a Vancouver dweller. Ugh. Sounds awful though, we don't use that too much. But we often sometimes say like city dweller or country dweller. And that just means somebody who lives in the city or lives in the country, right? Okay, so good enough for number 5. Let's move on to number 6. And number 6 here it says, Birmingham has plenty of amenities. Birmingham in the UK. They have a lot of amenities. What are amenities? Now, amenities, usually when I think of amenities, we use this term when we talk about apartment buildings. Like you're gonna you want to rent a room or buy a room in this apartment building, and you might ask the manager there before you move in, what are some of the amenities? And the amenities are kind of like bonuses or extra things, right? So that might mean like free electricity, right? You don't have to pay, or laundry machine in the room, or a swimming pool, or a gym, something like that. Now, if we're talking about the amenities of a city, that would mean things like, I don't know, shops, gyms, libraries, you know, those kind of things, museums, etc. So the answer we're actually looking for here that fits would be B, right? Because B says shops, libraries, hospitals, and entertainment complexes are just a few of them. All those things could be listed as amenities, right? So if you live in Vancouver like I do, there are many amenities in Vancouver, right? The SkyTrain, museums, art gallery, parks, you know, etc., etc. Okay, so let's move on to number 7 though. Number 7 says, a lot of people visit Paris for its cultural events. Okay, so cultural events. What are cultural events? Well, of course, that could mean concerts, music concerts or theater plays and stuff like that. So yeah, a lot of people do go to Paris for cultural events, like especially for art, I believe, right? I'm not a Paris kind of guy. I'm not really into art, but well, I did go there one time. Yeah, it was all right. Pretty expensive though, but anyhow. Yeah, we know in Paris, of course, they have the very, very famous, probably the world's most famous art museum, right? The Louvre, right? With all those wonderful paintings there. And so I think a good answer for number 7 would be something related to art. So let me take a look here. Sorry, C. Because C says chief among these are concerts and exhibitions, right? Lots of concerts in Paris, musical and otherwise, and lots of art exhibitions. Okay, good. Let's move on to number 8. Cities in poorer countries often lack basic infrastructures. Okay, so we need to think about the term infrastructure. What is infrastructure? Infrastructure actually describes many different things, right? But infrastructure describes simple things like transportation, roads, hospitals, schools, etc., etc. Everything that you need to make a city, I don't know, function well. And it's saying here, cities in poor countries often lack basic infrastructures. Of course, if you go to a city in a poor country, they don't have good infrastructure like cities, I don't know, in richer countries, right? So we need to think what would be a good response to this one, number 8. Oh, okay, well, unfortunately, or fortunately, the answer is F. Without them, they are unable to function properly as cities. So, I don't know, I don't want to stereotype any poor countries or poor cities around the world. I'm trying to think though, what was a city that has poor infrastructure? Actually, I don't think I've been to a city that has really poor infrastructure, at least not recently. But I've heard, like, you know, of course, quite a few cities, maybe Africa, have poor infrastructure. The roads are not good, transportation system is poor, maybe hospitals are bad, etc., etc. So, yeah, for number 8, our answer is F. Without them, they're unable to function properly. Okay, but let's move on to number 9. Number 9, we've got the pressures of modern city life can be difficult to deal with. Okay, now we know pressure, right? Pressure, like stress, right? The pressure of modern city life can be difficult to deal with. Now, I know for some people living in a large city can be really stressful, right? Maybe to think, oh, there's too much noise, there's too many people, I don't know how to find places, etc., etc. I'm from the countryside originally, right? I said I'm from Terrace, British Columbia, Canada, a very small town. So growing up in a small town, you know, at nighttime it's very, very quiet. Nobody's driving. Not too many crazy people. But then, you know, when I moved to a large city and lived in a large city, it took me time to kind of adapt to living in a large city. And the one thing that was maybe most difficult to adapt to was at nighttime when I tried to go to sleep. I always thought, wow, it's so noisy outside. Like I could still hear traffic, or I could hear some crazy guy walking by my apartment or something like that. So yeah, so for some people who come from small towns, the pressure of living in a modern city can be, you know, kind of stressful or difficult to deal with anyhow. So thinking about number 9, what would be a good answer? Okay, actually H, because that is related to pressure and stress. H says, stress-related illnesses are very common in cities like New York, right? So people who live in large cities, there's often a higher level of stress because, you know, life is very fast-paced, right? People are move, move, move. Time is money, right? I lived in Seoul, South Korea, a long time ago, and maybe some of you people watching are Korean. And yeah, at first when I lived in Seoul, I thought like, wow, this is crazy because Seoul is a huge metropolis, and it's very, very busy. Infrastructure is really excellent though. Infrastructure is awesome. But yeah, it can be very stressful there, right? But you just need some time, you adapt to it, you get used to it, and things get better. But I'm sure in a city like Seoul or like New York, stress-related illnesses are probably pretty common, unfortunately. Or, you know, London, Tokyo. And I know especially in like Seoul and Tokyo, a lot of my friends who are either Korean or Japanese or whatever, and who are working there, the working hours are usually very, very long, you know, like 9 to 7 or 9 to 9 or 9 to 10. And I think that stress can cause a lot of problems. Unfortunately, right? Anyhow, guys, moving on to number 10, the cost of living in some places can be very high. So, of course, we know what cost of living is. The cost of living is just things you need to be able to buy to live in a certain area, right? Rent, grocery bills, maybe basic bills for cable or internet, etc., etc. So the cost of living just describes, you know, what you have to pay for to live in a certain place, right? Now, actually, the cost of living in Vancouver is the highest in Canada, right? Even though Toronto is a bigger city with more economic opportunity, Vancouver has the highest cost of living in Canada. It's a very expensive place to rent or buy an apartment or house. I think the only cheap thing in Vancouver, there are only 2 cheap things in Vancouver. Pizza, which is kind of cheap, and electricity. If you live in Vancouver, you have to, you know, every month or every 2 months, you pay BC Hydro bill. And it's actually really cheap. I think it's like the only cheap thing here. Other than that, everything is expensive except for pizza. Anyhow, but number 10, a good answer to number 10, cost of living, would be E. And E here says, prices in London are particularly exorbitant. Exorbitant. Not a word I often use, exorbitant, but exorbitant means extremely high. So I also know the cost of living in London, even though Vancouver is bad, it's a very high cost of living in Vancouver. I have heard that London is extremely expensive with an exorbitant cost of living, right? Along with also, I think, New York, Singapore, Hong Kong, very, very expensive. In the past, a lot of Canadians and Americans thought that Japan had a very high cost of living. In Japan, we always thought, oh, we can't travel to Japan because it's too expensive and everybody lives in a tiny little box, you know. But I've been to Japan and I was always worried about going to Tokyo because I thought, oh, I can't go to Tokyo, it's too expensive. But I've been to Tokyo quite a few times now, and yeah, Tokyo's like kind of expensive, but not really. It's actually quite a bit cheaper than Vancouver. So I was really surprised. Like usually I think goods and services in Tokyo are probably 30% cheaper than Vancouver. So actually going to Japan is kind of awesome because it's kind of cheap, especially outside of Tokyo, no problem. Same with Korea. Like, one thing I really liked about living in Korea, even though it was Seoul, was I thought the cost of living was not too bad. Of course, I was not living permanently in Korea, so I didn't need to buy a house. If I did, maybe it is really expensive. But when I was in Seoul, like going to a restaurant or going to a bar, quite cheap compared to Canada. So I thought the cost of living was not bad. Anyhow, that's cost of living. Let's move on, guys. And to number 11. Okay, number 11. A lot of people appreciate the anonymity of living in a large city. Anonymity, anonymous, and anonymity. All right, what are those things? Well, anonymity means, you know, being able to kind of hide. And that's why a lot of people like the internet, because you can write something and you can hide your name. Sometimes people can't see who you are. You are anonymous, right? So a lot of times, like maybe Facebook or some other kind of social media, you post something anonymously, right? You don't put your name there, but you're allowed to write something. That's why people like the internet. But also, that's why a lot of people like living in a large city, because not many people really know who you are. And some people like that. So a good example would be in my hometown, in Terrace. It's a small town. Almost everybody knows each other. Like if I'm walking around my hometown, especially when I was younger, like everybody I saw, I would kind of know them. Even if we weren't close, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's Jack, and that's Sarah's cousin, right? I kind of knew them. So there's a lot of like gossip, like, oh, do you know Jack is dating Sarah? Like, oh my God. But in a big city, you have much more anonymity, right? You can remain anonymous. People don't really know who you are. And some people like that. I actually like that too. Well, I don't like, either way I'm okay. So a good answer here for number 11 would be K. They like to feel that they can do something without everybody knowing about it, right? Because that's one of the major benefits of living in a large city is not everybody knows who you are and people are not so nosy, right? And people in small towns, yeah, they can be kind of nosy. Anyhow, so let's move on to, and number 11, our answer is K. Let's move on to number 12. I love the urban lifestyle I lead. Awesome, okay, well, good for you. Urban lifestyle. So urban, I hope you guys already know the term, but urban area basically means, you know, city. What is the opposite of urban or urban area? Opposite is rural. And I know rural can be kind of hard to pronounce, like rural area, but rural area basically means countryside. Like my hometown is in the countryside, but Vancouver is a large city, it's an urban area. So I love the urban lifestyle I lead. Like, what would urban lifestyle mean? Urban lifestyle would mean like access to cultural events, you know, museums, concerts, art, etc. Access to a lot of restaurants and many places to meet people and hang out, right? So a good answer for number 12 would be something like D. In particular, I enjoy the atmosphere that is unique to the city. So, of course, atmosphere kind of means environment, right? Now, actually, another good term here that I would add to this, you've got environment. And environment is not always just talking about trees and rivers and mountains, but it just means like, you know, the area and describing the area. Atmosphere. And also another good term is vibe. Vibe, V-I-B-E. Vibe kind of describes the feeling in the air, right? It has a similar meaning to atmosphere and environment, but usually, like if you go to a bar, you go to a restaurant or an apartment building, whatever, you could say the vibe here is good, or the vibe here is bad, or this place has a fun vibe, right? Like the feeling in the air is good, the feeling in the atmosphere. Anyhow, number 12 is D. Let's move on, guys, because we're almost done. 13. In Singapore, private cars are banned from the central business district at peak periods. Well, good for Singapore. So central business district, which we can also refer to as CBD. Central business district is just an area where there are many, many businesses, right? Usually located in the downtown core of a city. And it's talking about here at peak periods. Peak periods, now periods here means time periods, right? Peak, as you guys might know, is like the top of a mountain. Or if we're thinking of a graph, this is the peak, right? The top point on a graph or a mountain. So peak periods means like busy periods of time in a city, right? So a good answer here would be L. Most people use buses and the underground to get to the banks and offices where they work, because peak periods is related to kind of rush hour. Okay guys, good. Let's take a look at number 14. I think this is our last one, so the answer is very obvious, but now my sheet is kind of cut off here. I think it says urban sprawl is prevalent in most cities. Now urban sprawl describes, now sprawl kind of means spread, right? Urban sprawl describes how a city kind of spreads out, and urban sprawl is usually kind of like a negative thing. Like it means the city is maybe expanding too quickly, they're not planning things very well, they're building houses, they're building apartment buildings like crazy, and it's spreading out too widely, right? But yeah, urban sprawl is prevalent, and prevalent here is a very nice word for common. If you say something is prevalent, you mean something is common, and that sounds really good. If you use the word prevalent, people are going to think, wow, you must be smart, or you must be well educated. Yeah. So anyhow, 14 here, our answer by process of elimination is J, all right? Because J is everywhere you go, there are buildings, building sites, pedestrian precincts, blocks of flats, and housing estates spreading into the countryside. So yeah, just remember sprawl describes kind of spread. Now, also, some of the terms here are very super British, right? Pedestrian precincts is okay, pedestrian areas. Blocks of flats. Flats, what are flats? We don't usually, well actually not, we never use the term flats here in Canada or America. Flats means like apartment buildings. Housing estates. Housing estates also, we don't really use those terms. Those are very, very British. So actually, I can't really describe them very well besides them meaning like residential areas. Okay guys, but we finally finished that off. Now, we can move on to the back side. The first side was about, you know, living in a large city, right, in an urban environment. The back side here is about living in the countryside. It's a bit shorter, but there are also really good terms here. So I think what we're going to do, guys, we're hitting into the break right now, 1 minute. Before we take a break, I'm just going to erase the board, and it'd be a good idea if you guys took a look at numbers 1 through 8 and thought of an appropriate response on the right side here. So we're going to continue with that after the break. And after we finish this, I'm going to talk about your guys' writing assignment that's due on Wednesday for this week. And then I'm going to try to help you out. We'll look at an example, and I'll give you guys some further examples, and we'll see how it goes. So anyhow, guys, we'll take a break in a minute here. And then afterwards, I will go over some other stuff, and we will look at this week's assignment, which is actually, of course, about talking about your neighborhood in your hometown. Now, actually, if you're in Vancouver, you could write about, you know, your neighborhood in Vancouver, but it would be much more interesting for whoever's marking that. It might be me. It might be me who's marking your assignment, or it might be Melanie. It's more interesting for us if you write about your hometown in your home country because then it'll be different, so it's more interesting. So maybe think about your hometown and your home country. That's much more interesting. Anyhow, guys, but we'll take a break. I will see you again in about 10-ish minutes. All right, see you soonish. Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to be taking a look at the backside of the sheet. Well, not the backside for you guys, but the next page here. And this one, like I said before, is talking more about living in the countryside, whereas the first one we were looking at was talking about living in a city. Okay, so yeah, number 2, it says, again, match the sentences in the left-hand column with an appropriate response in the right-hand column. Okay, so number 1, it says, I enjoy a rural lifestyle. So, I talked about rural before. Just remember, rural has a similar meaning to countryside, right? So, I enjoy a rural lifestyle. So, what would be a good response to I enjoy a rural lifestyle? Okay, actually, H would be a good response here. Now, H, the person who is responding is saying, do you? I always find there's nothing to do in the countryside. Okay, so this person is kind of, I don't want to say arguing with the initial statement, but they're kind of disagreeing, right? So the one person saying, oh, I like living in the countryside. I like living on a rural lifestyle. Another person saying, do you? Because I always find there's nothing to do in the countryside. And that's usually, you know, when you discuss living in the countryside versus living in an urban area, one of the big things about living in a urban area is that there are many things to do, right? Lots of cultural events, you know, shops, etc. And it's very exciting. But living in the countryside is usually, I don't want to say boring, but, well, there's less things to do, right? There are not so many shops, you know, blah, blah, blah. However, I don't know, I used to think the same way. I used to think like, like, oh my God, like living in the countryside is just so boring, especially after I lived in Seoul in South Korea. I thought after that, like, oh, I never want to live in the countryside again because I like having access to so many shops, or I like going to bars and clubs or museums or historical places, and you can't do that in the countryside. But now that I'm older, my opinion has kind of changed. Like living in the city is good, but if you have kids, sometimes living in the countryside is better, right? Because it's more quiet, slower pace of life. People are generally a little bit more helpful. But yeah, there's always that debate between living in rural areas and living in the countryside. But let's take a look at number 2. There isn't much pollution if you live outside of town. Well, of course, it's very true. Now, I know you guys probably already know what pollution is. Pollution is created by cars, factories, manufacturing plants, makes the air kind of dirty and the air quality kind of bad. Of course, if you live in a small town, there's usually not a lot of pollution. So, what would be a good response here? Okay. Actually, a good response here would be B, because the person is saying, I'm not so sure. All those pesticides and chemical fertilizers that farmers use nowadays can't be good for the environment. Okay, that's true. Now, if you live in the countryside around farms, farmers use a lot of, you know, pesticides and chemical fertilizers. Now, those things are not the same. These terms are not incredibly useful, but anyhow, pesticides is something that farmers kind of spray on their crops, you know, wheat or vegetables or whatever it is, to stop pests, bugs, insects from eating their crops, right? And then chemical fertilizers. Fertilizers are things that help vegetables or crops or whatever grow faster, right? So, of course, farmers use a lot of pesticide and they use a lot of chemical fertilizers if they want to grow a lot of food and they don't want pests to eat that food, right? Because they want to make more money. So this person is saying, like, that's not entirely true because farmers use pesticides and chemical fertilizers, which are a type of pollution, and that can't be good for the environment. Yeah, of course it's not good for the environment, but if you use natural fertilizer, it's not so bad. But natural fertilizer, we probably don't want to talk about that because it's kind of gross. Anyhow, so B is a good answer for number 2. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3 says, there's a lot of productive land in this area. Okay, productive, right? So productive, the adjective related to produce, right? Produce means to make something. Productive land would mean land that is able to probably create a lot of crops, so a lot of vegetables, a lot of wheat, rice, etc., etc., etc. So what would be a good response to number 3? No, number 3 is kind of a negative response, is G. G says, well, I can't see much evidence of cultivation. Cultivation is the act of growing something. So again, growing wheat, growing rice, growing potatoes, growing some kind of veggies, right? But productive land and cultivation are both related to farming and growing vegetables, growing wheat, or whatever it is. I remember when I was a kid reading that. I think the most productive land agriculturally in the world is actually in Egypt, and it's around the Nile Delta, because the river there and the soil next to the river is so good for growing wheat or other agricultural products. Usually land right next to a river, of course, is the best kind of productive land for growing something. But another area that's really famous for agriculture that a lot of people don't think about is actually California. California is an extremely productive state because they can grow any kind of vegetable, fruit, or whatever because the climate is really good. So actually, if you live in Canada and you live in Vancouver, or well, basically anywhere in Canada, a lot of the vegetables and fruits that you can buy, especially in the winter time, are from California, right? And a lot of those fruits are really, if you're in California and you have the fruit there, they're really, really good. Here, not so bad, not so good. I think they send us the bad stuff. Anyhow, number 4, guys. In recent years, there has been a lot of migration from the towns to the city. Okay, migration is an interesting term. Migration and migrant. A migrant is a person who moves from one place to another one. It's kind of related to immigrant, but migrant would just be within a certain country, right? However, when we often talk about the problems with immigration in the United States, we often talk about how a lot of Mexican migrants move from Mexico up into the United States in order to find work or to have a better lifestyle. And Canada has a lot of immigration and migrants from other countries as well. But this one here is saying there's been a lot of migration from towns to cities. Now, historically, this is true. You know, for the past 150, 200 years, there's been this, sudden explosion in urban centers, right, in cities. Prior to, I don't know, the Industrial Revolution and our modern lifestyle, I think about 90 or 80% of the population usually lived in the countryside, right? Because they got to grow crops and they got to feed their own family. But once industrialization happened and they started making factories and these kind of things, people started moving from towns to cities because then they could get a job in the city and could make more money, and also agriculture became more productive and you didn't need as many people, right? Anyhow, I like talking about those kind of things, but of course, recently, if you think about countries like Canada or the United States, I think about, I'd have to Google it, but I think about basically 80% of the population of Canada and the United States lives in an urban center, and only 20% live in smaller towns like my hometown. However, I did hear that recently, because of the coronavirus, that there's actually been people kind of going the opposite way. There's people moving from cities back to smaller towns because living in a smaller town, there's more distance between you and your neighbors, and it might be safer, especially in a time like these times, to live in the countryside. But we got to find our answer here. So number 4, in recent years there has been a lot of migration from the towns to the cities. Something that would match up with this would be, F. I'm not surprised. With such terrible prospects within towns, depopulation is inevitable. Wow. That is a tough response. Yeah, such terrible prospects. Now, prospects can mean something similar to opportunities. Like usually people who live in small towns don't have a lot of good prospects. There are not a lot of opportunities, right? Now, opportunities in regards to work and education, right? One of the reasons I moved away from my hometown is because there's no university and there's not a lot of different places to work at, so there weren't good prospects. And then it also says depopulation is inevitable. Now, inevitable is an awesome word that I want to talk about a little bit here. Depopulation, inevitable. But depopulation means the population is decreasing, right? Depopulation is inevitable. Now, inevitable means basically something is going to happen. Something is going to happen and it cannot be stopped. So, it's sad, but if you have a pet, dog or a cat or whatever, your pet's death is inevitable, right? Like your pet is going to die, hopefully not tomorrow or not next week, but it cannot be stopped. Ugh, that's such a sad example. But inevitable just means something's going to happen and you cannot stop it. So depopulation of small towns is inevitable because there are not a lot of economic opportunities. However, like I just said, the recent trend, at least in Canada, is that people are kind of moving to small towns now, outside of the cities, not because of opportunity, but because of, the coronavirus, basically. Anyhow, let's move on, guys. Number 5. The government has promised to leave the green belt alone. What would the green belt be? So anyhow, the answer here is A. Because A says, really? So why are we seeing so much construction in the countryside around London? Okay, now, green belt is kind of an interesting term. This might be more specific to the UK. We don't use this term here too much. But green belt would mean an area with a lot of nature or a lot of farming, right? It's very natural. So that's what that means. Anyhow, moving on to number 6. There's been a huge reduction in the amount of arable land over the last 20 years. Okay, arable land. Not a very useful term, but arable land basically has a similar meaning to productive land, agriculturally productive land. If it's arable land, that means you can grow vegetables or wheat or something there, right? So they're saying, maybe this is specific to the United Kingdom, that there's been a reduction or decrease in the amount of arable land. So maybe unfortunately because of pollution or because of urban sprawl, maybe the UK is losing its arable land. Also Canada, if you think about it, Canada is a huge, huge country. But actually, most of Canada does not have much arable land. The amount of arable land in Canada would be very small, 5%, maybe 10% if we're really lucky, because most of the land in Canada up north is really, really cold, and there's lots of forests and lots of mountains. That land is not very useful for growing something. There are, of course, lots of places in Canada that can still produce a lot of food, but not too much arable land in Canada. Anyhow, a good response to number 6 would be C. And C here says, that's probably because we import more food from abroad. Oh, okay, so in the UK's case, maybe it's because they're just importing food into the country, so they don't need so much arable land anymore. Now, another example that pops into my mind, I'm not too sure about Korea's case, but I know with Japan, that Japan imports a lot of its food. I think it's about 60 or 70%, because Japan also, like Canada, does not have so much arable land because there are so many urban centers, and a lot of Japan is very mountainous. And I think that would be similar with Korea as well. I know in Korea, for example, there's a lot of mountainous terrain, although there is some good farming and arable areas in Korea as well. I think Korea, well, it's a relatively small country with a relatively large population, like what, 50 million people? I'm pretty sure Korea also has to import quite a lot of food. Canada, technically, we can grow our own food, but we can't grow too many fruits, and that's why we rely on California. Anyhow, let's move on to number 7, guys. My uncle's farm covers almost 800 hectares. Now, hectares is describing a certain amount of land. You know, in Canada, we usually use acres, which is used more by the Americans. I think hectares is used more by the British or Europeans, but it just describes a certain amount of land. I can't really give you a good number though. But let's think about a good response here. Good response for 7 would be E. Really, how much is that in acres? So hectares and acres have a similar meaning in that they both describe a certain amount of land. Was that E? Yes, that was E. Okay, and by process of elimination, we all know the answer to number 8 is D. So let's take a look at 8. What are the main crops grown in this area? Now, like I said before, crops describes anything that can be grown. So that could be rice, it could be wheat, it could be potatoes, it could be cucumbers, whatever, right? So number 8, our answer is D. Mostly wheat, oats, and barley. So they're all a type of grain or staple food. Staple food is a good one. I'm going to write that down. Staple food. Okay, now if you think about this term here, you might think, well, that's really weird because I don't want to eat staples. That would really hurt, and it hurt my stomach. But a staple food basically means like kind of common carbohydrate, or like main, or basically like main food. So in every country, there's kind of every country has its own like staple food. In most of Europe in the past, it was wheat, and then wheat is turned into bread, of course. But more recently, I think potatoes have become much more popular since they were found in South America. But anyhow, but in East Asia, like Japan and Korea, I believe the staple food would obviously be rice. So yeah, this includes things like rice, wheat, potatoes, etc. Canada's case, probably kind of a little bit more confusing in that, like, traditionally in Canada, I think the staple food was probably potatoes, actually. Potatoes or wheat. But now it's more of a mixture because we have many people from different countries. So potato, wheat, pasta. And in Vancouver, because there's a lot of people from East Asia living here and South Asia, also rice. But anyhow. All right, guys, so I'm going to stop it here. There are more exercises here on this sheet, which I would highly recommend that you guys check out and try to do. I believe there's also an answer key here. So after you do it, you could check your answers, see how you do. Try to use the vocabulary in the right context because it's pretty useful. But what we need to do next is take a look at your writing assignment that's due on Wednesday. Try to think about it, and we'll take a look at a quick example. I don't know if I'm going to have time to write my own example, but there is a quick example here. So, everybody, please take a look at this sheet here. It says Global College Assignment. It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood. And let's take a look at what you guys got to do. So, it says this week, you will be using directional prepositions, prepositions of place and movement, to describe your neighborhood in a vivid way. In your 4 to 5 paragraph written response, you will use prepositions and relevant vocabulary to describe and explain the location of, and then you've got 4 things. Some landmarks around your neighborhood, some nice places to eat or go shopping, the types of people who live around you, and the infrastructure that surrounds you. And it says, here is an example of a GC teacher's neighborhood in downtown Vancouver. Okay. All right, guys, so let's think about this. Let's plan this out a bit. Now, it says you should write a 4 or 5 paragraph written response about your neighborhood, where you live. Now, like I said before, it would be much more interesting if you write about the neighborhood in your hometown, right? So guys, let's think here. If you're gonna break it into a traditional 5 paragraph paper, I'm just gonna give you a quick breakdown of how you could divide this into different paragraphs. So, first paragraph, of course, it should just be your introduction. Now, in your introduction, you should probably briefly describe your house or apartment. So what I would do is I would usually start by just describing exactly where my apartment or house is, and that should be good enough. Remember, an introduction paragraph should be pretty short, right? You want to think like 2 to 4 sentences, and that should be enough, right? So your first paragraph, just describe where your house, or briefly describe your house or apartment and where it is located. After the introduction, you're gonna get into your body paragraphs, right? Body paragraph 1, 2, 3, and then lastly your conclusion. Now, we have some things to pick from here. Second paragraph. So, some landmarks around your neighborhood, some nice places to eat or shop. Now, it doesn't really matter in what order you choose these ones. I would probably start by talking about nice places to eat or go shopping. So, body paragraph 1. Write about shops and restaurants in your neighborhood. Okay, so that's what I would probably write about in the second paragraph. Now also remember, with this one here, you want to use a lot of directional prepositions, right? So you want to use terms like, across from my apartment there is a restaurant. The name of the restaurant is etc., etc., and I like to go there and have breakfast or whatever. So you want to talk about shops and restaurants that you like in your neighborhood, and you want to use a lot of directional prepositions here, right? Now, after your second body paragraph, you'll get into, or sorry, after your first body paragraph, you'll get into your second. So body paragraph 2. Now, again, you have some options here. The type of people who live around you, the infrastructure. So maybe after this one, might be a good idea to write about landmarks and infrastructure. Maybe I'm going to put those two into one. Write about landmarks and infrastructure. Okay, so maybe in the second body paragraph, you're going to talk about landmarks. Now, what are landmarks? Now, landmarks are things that, you know, maybe like historical sites or things that really grab people's attention. So if I'm thinking about Vancouver, I would think about places like Canada Place, or maybe the stadium where the Vancouver Canucks play, or maybe Gastown where there's a lot of like interesting shops and some historical museums, or maybe Granville Island where they have, yeah, a lot of history and a famous art museum. So I could write about this here. But again, you want to use directional prepositions to describe where these places are located, especially in relation to your house or apartment. So maybe you live close to Granville Island, right? And you say like, located 3 blocks south of my apartment is Granville Island. Granville Island is famous for da 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 da. 5 blocks north of my apartment is Canada Place. Canada Place is a famous exhibition center in Vancouver. Da 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 da. But you could also write about the infrastructure in your hometown. So when you're writing about infrastructure, you could talk about the transportation system, you could talk about the roads, you could talk about where hospitals are, and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's what I would recommend for your 3rd paragraph or your body paragraph number 2. So let's think about your 4th paragraph, and this is body paragraph 3. Now, body paragraph 3, I think this would be a good point to talk about the types of people who live around you. So write about your neighbors. Now, I think that it would probably be a good idea to start by talking about, let's say, like if you're renting an apartment, maybe talk about the other people who live in your apartment building. Talk about those people first. And then think about your neighborhood, you know, the area in like a 4 or 5 block radius of your apartment, and think about the people who generally live in your neighborhood around you, and then talk about them. Now, in this paragraph here, you're not gonna need to use as many directional prepositions, right? Because you're gonna be writing about the characteristics, the personalities, and the type of people who live around you, right? So this one should be more interesting. Probably you're going to be using less directional prepositions. But yeah, talk about the people who live in your neighborhood, and yeah, it should be good. So of course, your 5th and final paragraph, this should be your conclusion. Now, what I think you should write about in your conclusion, of course, a conclusion is always like a quick summary, right? Summarize, I would say summarize your opinion. Summarize your opinion of your neighborhood. So yeah, I would summarize my opinion of my neighborhood, and I think you should kind of conclude things by saying whether you actually really like living in this neighborhood or not. And if you don't like living there, are you going to move, or what's your plan, right? And that's how I think you could create a pretty good 5-paragraph paper for this assignment. Introduce it, talk about exactly where you live and where it's located, 2, 3, 4 sentences. Body paragraph 1, 2, 3. Talk about shops and restaurants in your neighborhood. Move on, talk about landmarks, maybe infrastructure. This is not necessary. Maybe you focus more on landmarks. Body paragraph 3, write about your neighbors. What are their, characteristics? What's their personality like? And lastly, just kind of summarize what you think of your neighborhood. Is it a great place? Is it a bad place? Is it okay? What's your plan in the future? Are you going to move somewhere else? Maybe not. Maybe you really like your place, right? Now, we do have an example here, guys. The example is not following this style that I prefer you to follow, but there are some good terms used here, and this might give you some ideas. So let's take a look at this example from a GC teacher. Okay. So it says, I live in an apartment with my wife and 1.5-year-old daughter. About 3 blocks south of my apartment is Nelson Park. So 3 blocks south of, so we have some directional prepositions, it's good. Nelson Park has a dog park, so I often take my daughter there because she is so crazy about dogs. During the summer, there is a farmer's market that sets up shop next to Nelson Park. They sell fresh vegetables, fruits, pies, and a variety of scrumptious snacks. It gets a bit crowded, but it is quite nice and my wife and I really enjoy it. If you go 2 blocks south of the park, you will arrive on Davie Street. My wife and I really like Davie Street because Davie has some of the best and cheapest restaurants in Vancouver. My wife and I really love Pho Goodness. We believe they serve the best Vietnamese food in downtown Vancouver. Okay, yeah, 2 blocks south. Okay, that's good. And right next to my apartment, so I got next to, is a small Japanese convenience store called Conbinia. Here you can find many Japanese products such as snacks, drinks, seaweed, etc. My wife and I often go there to shop because we cook a lot of Japanese food. My daughter also loves Conbinia because they have a lot of cute cartoons. The other residents in my apartment building come from a variety of different cultural backgrounds. There are some Canadians, of course, Mexicans, Japanese, Chinese, etc. There are quite a few young and middle-aged professionals in my apartment, along with some international students. In addition to that, I often notice quite a few BMWs and Mercedes when walking through our parking garage. So I guess there are some rich people living in my apartment complex as well. Alright, and that's about it. Alright guys, so like I said before, the example you have here is not really following this style here, but it does contain a lot of the things that the assignment requires, right? The assignment wants you to talk about shops and restaurants. They want you to talk about landmarks. They want you to talk about the people who live around you, right? So what I would recommend is thinking about this example, and with that list of directional prepositions and a list of related vocabulary, try to create this here. If you can create this, that's pretty good. If this is a little bit too tough for you, cut out one of the paragraphs here, right? Maybe you don't have enough time to write a 5-paragraph paper, but if you can't write 5 paragraphs, at least try to write 4. Okay guys, but one last thing we can do today before we end today's class is we could take a look at this other example we have. Now, there is an audio link there for this here, but I don't know, I'm not going to set it up on the computer. I think I could just read this for you. This is related to neighborhoods that you could visit in Vancouver. Probably not a lot of tourism in Vancouver right now. This is more focused on certain landmarks in Vancouver, and this says the top 7 neighborhoods to visit Vancouver travel. So if you've been here, you probably know these places. If you plan on traveling to Vancouver sometime in the future, 2 years later, 3 years later, you know, a couple of years down the road, maybe this is kind of useful for you, and there might be some terms that might help you guys with your writing, or it might get your brain kind of moving on this. So let's take a look at this, guys. I got the transcript. It says, Vancouver is considered one of the world's best neighborhoods to live in, and exploring the different neighborhoods makes it easy to see why. Downtown, where you'll find the Vancouver Art Gallery and the Bill Reid Museum, as well as the best high-end shopping in the city. Just east of downtown is Gastown, the oldest part of Vancouver. Gastown was rebuilt after a devastating fire in the late 1800s, and there are still a lot of Victorian-style buildings left. Not far from Gastown is Vancouver's Chinatown, where you'll find great restaurants, a Chinese garden, and plenty of shopping opportunities. Then head over to West End, one of the more popular neighborhoods in Vancouver, where you can hike through Stanley Park and take a break from the city. But if the park isn't far enough from the city for you, visit Granville Island for a quirky, small-town feel. Wander through the Granville Island Public Market for a taste of local food and art. Back in the city, sports fans will probably find themselves in the Yaletown/False Creek area, which is where Vancouver's major sports arenas are located. It's also one of the more upscale, fashionable areas with lots of great shopping and restaurants. Even trendier is Kitsilano, where you'll find the Museum of Anthropology, Kitsilano Beach, and lots of great restaurants. Take your time getting acquainted with the different parts of Vancouver. You'll be sure to love it just as much as the locals do. Okay guys, so this is kind of like a tourist pitch. Like they're trying to attract people to Vancouver, and they're talking about all these different neighborhoods within Vancouver, right? Now, like I said, couple of good words here, right? So scanning over this again, let's try to spot them and think about what those terms mean. Well, in the introduction they say, Vancouver is considered one of the world's best neighborhoods. This is kind of true. If you guys take a look at the UN rankings for most livable cities, Vancouver is usually in the top 5. I think sometimes it was number 1, which I always thought was kind of weird. And I was like, how do they make this list? Because Vancouver is so expensive. But I think the main reason why Vancouver gets really high marks is because Vancouver has a very good mix of like city and nature. There's a lot of green areas in Vancouver, a lot of parks, and the lifestyle here is pretty relaxed or laid back, so it's not such a stressful city. But anyhow, now a good term here pops up in the 4th line. It says best high-end shopping in the city. Okay, so high-end something. If we say high-end something, it means like it's the best of the best, right? Like high-end technology means this technology is some of the best, right? Like, you know, Apple iPhones are high-end makes high-end smartphones, or Samsung makes high-end smartphones, like some of the best tech, right? But if we say high-end shopping, for example, that means like places that are like very popular and probably expensive. Gucci, Louis Vuitton. Well, that's about it for me actually. I don't really know high-end shopping. So yeah, high-end though, kind of a useful term. You might want to use that. Just east of Gastown, we're going to build after devastating. Devastating. Devastating, kind of a useful term here. Devastate and devastating, right? If something is devastating, it is destructive. It is destroying something, right? If you experience something really, really terrible, let's say your cat or dog gets hit by a car and dies. You could say that was a devastating experience, right? It really caused you a lot of pain, hopefully just emotional, right? But anyhow, there was a fire in Gastown. It was very devastating and it means it destroyed a lot of buildings. Anyhow, now from plenty of shopping, most popular hike through Stanley Park, take a break. Okay, now later on near the middle here it says visit Granville Island for a quirky small town feel. Quirky, kind of an interesting word. Quirky is an adjective that kind of that has a similar meaning to weird or strange, but kind of in a positive way. Like if you guys go to Granville Island, you would definitely think, okay, yeah, this is definitely quirky. Like it's a little bit weird, a little bit strange, it's not normal, but in a good way, not in a negative way, in a very, very good way. I'm trying to think, okay, if you guys think of the famous American actor, Johnny Depp, in the past, you know, he was a really kind of quirky dude, quirky guy. He's not like a normal, conventional guy. He was always like a little bit strange, right? Johnny Depp is a very quirky guy, quirky actor. Besides Johnny Depp, other quirky actors. Or if you guys have watched the TV series Friends, you know, Rachel, Monica, Ross, Chandler, Joey, and Phoebe, right? The one character who's very, very quirky is, of course, Phoebe. Phoebe is like, you know, she's kind of weird, kind of strange, but not in a negative way, kind of in a positive, funny way. So she's a good example of quirky, along with Johnny Depp. So that's quirky. But anyhow, wander through back in the cities. Okay, it is also one of them. Okay. Another useful term here might be upscale. It says it's also one of the more upscale, fashionable areas. Now, upscale and high-end kind of have a very, very similar meaning, right? If something is described as upscale, it means, again, high quality, usually also very expensive, right? If I say this area is an upscale area, it means this area is very expensive, right? It's too expensive, this area, right? If we're thinking about upscale areas in Vancouver, I think they mentioned Yaletown and also Kitsilano. These areas are kind of famous for being very expensive, but very fashionable, kind of cool areas. So we could call them upscale. If I'm thinking, where have I been? Okay, well, if I went to Tokyo, I think Shinjuku or Shibuya or what's the famous street? Something with a G. I can't remember the name. Anyhow, I think those areas are upscale, maybe maybe more expensive, I'm not sure. Or if you go to Paris, of course, one of the world's most famous streets for shopping, for upscale and high-end products, whether it's perfume or fashion or chocolate or food, is the Champs-Élysées. It's a very famous street, probably the world's best shopping, probably #1 in the world, like honestly. If you go to the Champs-Élysées, you can find many fine French products, right? Very well crafted, very expensive, and we would call that an upscale and high-end area. Okay guys, other than that, we have the term trendy. It says even trendier is Kitsilano. Okay, so trendier, this is the comparative term, which is of course related to the original term trendy. Just give me a second here, I'll just erase this. I hope you guys know what trend and trendy is, because that's something you could talk about when you're talking about your neighborhood. Is your neighborhood a trendy area? Maybe it isn't. I'm not sure. Okay, so there's trend, which is the noun, and then there's trendy, which is the adjective, and trendier is the comparative adjective form, right? Now, we know that a trend, like a fashion trend, is when everybody starts wearing a certain style of clothing, and then everybody wants to follow that. Similar to a fad. Similar but not the same. So, but fad is kind of a synonym of trend. Anyhow, in Vancouver, there's a lot of different trends when it comes to fashion and also to eating or food, right? Just like everywhere else in the world. And the adjective form is trendy. So of course, I think Vancouver was the one that kind of started the yoga pants trend. That started in Vancouver. It started with Lululemon, which is located in Vancouver. They produce a lot of yoga pants, right? So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your point of view, that trend came from here. But that specifically came from the Kitsilano area, where there's kind of a lot of more upscale, high-end shops, and there are more trendy people that care about fashion. So yeah, trend and trendy. I don't really know what is trendy in Vancouver right now. I am out of the loop, out of the cultural loop. I don't really pay attention. Maybe I think I'm too old, or I just never cared. But yeah. So they say Kitsilano is a trendy area. So maybe when you guys are describing your neighborhood, you could talk about, is it trendy? Is it upscale? Is it high-end? Maybe it isn't, and that's fine, right? Maybe you could think about, in relation to your neighborhood, where is the trendy, cool, upscale neighborhood in Sao Paulo, in Tokyo, in Seoul, or wherever you live, right? So that's trendy, and take your time getting acquainted. Okay, good. Yeah, no, I think that's about it. But yeah, throughout this article here, they talk a lot about different landmarks, like some of them, like the Museum of Anthropology, Kitsilano Beach, etc., etc. So although this is not formed into a 5-paragraph paper, there's a lot of good vocabulary here and a lot of good expressions. So I think you guys should try to take some of this and apply it towards your own paper, especially using cool terms like trend, trendy, upscale, high-end, etc., right? Take that, think about that, and then create your own 5-paragraph paper. All right, guys, so that's about it. But you guys will notice that because I felt like we didn't have enough time today, I did skip a lot of the other activities. So what I do recommend doing, if you have some extra time at home, is continuing onwards with this on the road topic-specific vocabulary. Try this out because I believe there is an answer key here. So try it out first, see if you can get the correct answer. That should be good practice and help you pick up more vocab. And yeah, continue onwards. The other major one that we skipped here was location and direction, right? Because I thought this would suck up way too much time. This would be a really good way to review directional prepositions and possibly pick up some more of them. You've got things like north, west, south, and east, and you have things like at right angles, diagonally, directly, halfway, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. This would be really good to go over, and I believe there is an answer key to this one somewhere. But try this out because this is really, really, really good practice. I know a lot of these directional prepositions are pretty easy for you guys out there, but it's always a good idea to review them and go over them and test yourself out, see if you can find the correct answers, and again, try to apply that to your paper, which you should submit by Wednesday before class, right? So if you got today in the afternoon and evening and you got tomorrow, try your best to write as much as you can, right? Try your best to make a 5-paragraph paper and use those directional prepositions. Okay guys, well that about does it for me today. Sorry if I seem like I have a cough or if I look tired. My wife and I just had a kid. Not last week, Tuesday, the week before. Was it Tuesday or Monday? Can't remember anymore. So I'm not very alert right now because I'm not getting a lot of sleep. But hopefully next time you guys see me on Friday, I will be better rested and I will be more alert. And also on Friday, of course, you guys will have a quiz. So yeah, make sure you try to learn these directional prepositions. And if you have somebody at home that you can practice with, it's a really good idea to kind of pair up with, you know, your wife, husband, girlfriend, boyfriend, roommate, friend, homeless guy outside. Well, no, not the homeless guy outside. But match up with somebody and practice some of this stuff together, right? That'll make it more interesting and hopefully more useful for you guys. Anyhow, guys, yeah, I will see you on Friday. I hope you guys have a good couple of days and that you are being productive these days. And yeah, hopefully I will get some more sleep today, tonight. And then yeah, I will see you guys on Friday. And hopefully everything is okay. I noticed there are quite a lot of people from Brazil watching, which is great. Yeah. Actually, I don't know what time is it in Japan and Korea right now. Maybe too early. No, too late. You guys are probably sleeping. In Brazil, I'm not sure about Brazil. Not too sure. But yeah, oh, also, yeah, remember, for your assignment, please write about your neighborhood. Like, if you're in Vancouver, that's awesome, that's great. Or if you're in Canada, that's cool and everything. And you can write about your neighborhood in Vancouver, that's fine, that's up to you. But it would be so much more interesting for me and Melanie if you guys write about your hometown and your neighborhood in your hometown. That's just more interesting for us to read about because, you know, it's a different place for us. Then we can try to use our imagination. If you write about a place in Vancouver, you know, Melanie and I, we already know this place. It's not really interesting for us. So I really prefer if you write about your neighborhood in your hometown. That would be much, much better. Or maybe for me, if I wrote one for you guys, yeah, of course I could always write about Vancouver, but it'd probably be more interesting for you guys if I wrote about my hometown, Terrace. Anyhow, guys, all right, so good luck, have fun, and I will see you guys on Friday. You guys will see Melanie tomorrow. Melanie's gonna be doing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You'll have a lot of fun with her. Should be great. Okay, guys, see you on Friday.